name is Alison Gibson. I've been working in the tech space for around 15 years, and I'm currently working with the Warner Music Group, and I am co-chair of Womxn of Warner, which is a ERG or an employee resource group of about 270 members in that community. Initially, I had started in the finance team. So I was working at a really large mobile operator. And when they were implementing all of the processes, I was working very, very closely with the tech team because we had to work with the systems, and I was doing all the UAT and writing the scripts for it. And then somebody said to me, actually, I think you could add value, to the tech side of things. That being a subject matter expert is one thing, but the way that you're approaching the testing is quite rigorous and quite detailed, and it would be really helpful. So I got into it accidentally through project work. For me, unless it gets measured, it doesn't get done. So all of the commitments around DEI need to be like any other KPI. All the other KPIs are measured and someone monitors to see the progress against that target. So DEI is no different. Have measurable goals around it and look at reviewing that consistently to actually arrive at the target. It's as simple as that, really. In the UK, there are some statutory guidelines around this. So even before we start looking at over and above the statutory, because I work for an organisation that has over 250 employees, we have a statutory obligation to track the gender gap, the gender pay gap. So that's the basic point, and then looking to go beyond that. So that annual review is really an opportunity to look at gender diversity and look at how it's actually impacted throughout the entire company. Now, the company I work with, the organisation, is looking at ethnicity. So perhaps, in time we can evolve with that metric and look at the intersectionality, not just on ethnicity, but for example, things like parenthood, because we also capture people in the workforce that are parents and see how that impacts their careers. So it's getting that level of detail and that level of data to actually understand what's happening in the workplace, and then not just measure it, but evolve with the metric to see how we can resolve issues that have been identified by those metrics and by those statistics. Initially, I was actually chairing a much smaller group called Women in Tech, and part of the issue was we didn't have the volume because it wasn't enough, to get quorum and to get big impact. So recently, just last year, we merged the Women in Tech group with the Womxn of Warner's, and we also have allies in our ERG. Now, some critical factors for the success of an ERG. I've mentioned the first one. You must have quorum. You have to have enough people in that community for it to thrive. And I would say at a minimum, you would need 8 to get a quorum going for an ERG. But in an organisation as large as ourselves, we are fortunate enough to have hundreds of not just women, but allies as well. And I actually believe it starts from senior management. So even before you look at the chairs and how our committee works, because we have a committee at the moment of 7 women and 2 co-chairs. I'm one of the co-chairs. But even before we look at the structure in the ERG, we can look at the leadership team and their commitment to that ERG, in terms of funding and also in terms of time and space that they give to the ERG. So it's not just a question of throwing money at it, but actually allowing, that feedback loop so that things that come from our community are actually treated with respect and given the time and energy to focus on that as well. After 3 years of being involved in these ERGs, I've definitely got some strong takeaways. It has to be a safe space. And what do I mean by a safe space? If women are not feeling supported, this is the opportunity to share with their peers, to be vulnerable and actually say, this isn't working for me. And unless we can tap into that pain point and learn from it, the ERG will not be effective. So when people say, I don't feel listened to, I don't feel heard, this is the network that says, I'm here, even if it's just listening over a coffee. I've personally felt supported. So I've gone to senior leadership and said, look, I want to have funding, not just for internal events, but for external. For example, there's a Women in Tech conference, and we've had up to 10 women participate. Now, those aren't free, so we have to be sponsored. And that sponsorship, on request, I have had support for. Other things that we've tried to do with events and funding those events, I've been fortunate to have that. But part of the issue is getting senior leadership to a point where they're not just saying, I support DEI, they're actually living and breathing it. And by that I mean, it's moving beyond the lip service. People, generally speaking, say, yes, I want to commit to DEI, but they're not realizing that actually means I have to change what I'm doing. So, for example, if I used to hire just from my pool of friends or my network, DEI actually means that's not how it works. To make it truly open, I need to look at everybody that has the skills and talent, and I need to make it wider than my existing network. I need to be completely transparent and open about how I fill those hires and how I progress people through the organization based on merit. There's a couple of approaches. Some people feel that going one-on-one and talking about things that you're facing, asking for help and seeing where they're coming from, that can work, that can be effective. However, some people do feel, what's the right word, triggered or defensive if they're approached that way. So you have to know the leader that you're speaking with, because it can be misinterpreted and they can become defensive and shut down. So that's the only downside to that. The other thing is having these general education programs. So, for example, we're having for the first time a senior panel for our International Women's Day, and it's all women of colour. Even the moderator is a woman of colour. That's never been done for or before. So just being in that room, it's very anonymous. We're not asking people to sign up. We're just asking people to turn up in that space. And we're hoping just listening to these women, because they're at the top of their game, they're at MD level and above, so they're managing a whole unit. Just listening and being in the room, you're absorbing some of their challenges and some of their issues. So I would say it's a two-strand approach. Individually, if that feels comfortable and if the person is receptive enough, if you're not making progress, it's better actually to say nothing at all, because sometimes persisting with it can be counterproductive. But having it in an open forum where people dip in where they feel comfortable, then that is far more powerful, and it's individual driven to be aware of what's happening. I'm very excited about this because there's lots of things happening in my organisation. So one of the initiatives which we kicked off last year was called Leaders on the Rise. So this specific program is targeted at women. So what we're doing for the first time, we're getting women in different quartiles, using the quartiles from the Gender Pay Gap report. So the upper quartile is where we have a specific issue, but lower down, we need to target those women that want to progress and assist them in their development and their career journey. So this Leaders on the Rise, it's not done through the line. It's done through the ERG, which means we get a sense of community, and you have your peers as part of that process. So they're in the room with you and you're actually bouncing off each other. So that community, that network becomes far more powerful as a group where people are, if you like, taking charge of their own development and using each other as a sounding board. So that's a really exciting project. We have got other initiatives. We have got the HR team, which we work closely with as part of the ERG. We try to give them unfiltered feedback because we feel that's very important. If that gets stifled, then people just move away. So that feedback loop, that's a critical factor in the ERG's role, to be that sounding board, that safe space. So none of it is seen personally. It's not Sue complaining. It's Women of Warner talking about an issue that affects all the women. So it depersonalizes it, and it makes it far more powerful, for leaders to actually be receptive to Katinka. This is a very emotive issue for me because as a parent myself, I've experienced firsthand, believe it or not, Katinka, I've had managers say to me, I do not employ women because they go off and have babies. People have actually said that to me. Yeah, as a mother, as a working mother. So this issue of not seeing that mothers, parents, all of us have worth and value to contribute. Until we get to a place where everybody sees that those needs of having affordable childcare are, if you like, fundamental to enabling women in the workforce. And we don't see parenthood as a barrier, but we embrace it because it develops a side of you that nothing else develops. My level of resilience, having been a mother to two and having to work and manage a career through that is a completely different skill set. It's not from a textbook. It's from having young children and supporting them through their journey. So those skills are invaluable. And until employers get to that point where they see parents as adding more, not less, or they see them as a burden. So that's a fundamental shift in attitudes. Yeah, so that we see that childcare, or seeing that for that person to contribute fully, they need to have affordable childcare. And part of our job is to enable lawmakers, whoever has impact on that, the government, legislation, to actually support us. The children are our future. If we don't have children, we have no society. So we have to factor that in and get smarter, at seeing talent. So I've experienced that discrimination when people have said to me, you've got young children, why should I employ you? Because, I've implemented so many different software packages. I've got, numerous recommendations where people have said this has worked well, and Alison's attentive. So my talent goes before my specific needs. So see my talent, not that I'm a mother. So it's changing that whole mindset. I actually feel that lots of people, I've seen it firsthand, give too much power to one leader. I know your line manager is a critical relationship, but I've seen people leave because they can't get support from one person. So my watchword would be look around to your peers. Even if you're not in an organization that has a big ERG like ours, there will be other people facing similar issues. So look around the room and see who else is in there. I know people look up the chain, but I'm saying look who else is around you, because that support, that lateral support, can make the difference between staying and going. I've seen people leave because of a leader, and that leader sometimes leaves the following month. And I'm thinking, why did they go through that? If they just, asked for help or said, I needed this specific thing to happen for me to stay, we could have tried to support them. And I actually feel sometimes we need to depersonalize these things and actually look at the root issue and how can I get help? If I haven't got it through the line, let's look elsewhere. It's a whole network.